Welcome to the Matson Shooting Academy Podcast. If you're a clay target shooter, then we have what you're looking for. Speaking with some of the best in the industry about the game you're passionate about. Subscribe to the Clay Lab on YouTube and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or your favorite podcast platform. The Matson Shooting Academy Podcast is brought to you by Castellani USA, Greenwood Custom Stocks, and Ranger Eyewear. Here's your host, Cody Matson of Matson Shooting Academy.
Hey everybody, welcome to the show. I have a special guest on tonight. I have Harvey Schwartz, who's the president of the GSCA, and I'm very excited to speak with him tonight about all that he's done with the GSCA and all the good things to come. So Harvey, welcome to the show.
Cody, thanks for having me. I'm honored to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So just connected with you a little while ago, and how's life in Texas?
Texas is wonderful. No state income tax and Mexican food.
Those are two big bonuses. That's great. Excellent. Well, Harvey, I wanted to have you on the show ever since I got the podcast started. When I moved to Georgia, Will Fennell sent me a couple phone numbers of folks that I needed to get in touch with. And you were one of the very first people that I spoke with when I knew that I was moving to Georgia. So I've had that long time connection with you, and we've got a lot of mutual friends in the sport. But I want people to know more about you and your role with the GSCA and just you as a shooter in general. So kind of give me a little bit of backstory. How did you get involved in sporting clays?
A good friend of mine, Russ Magby, invited me to go on a shoot with him, and the date was May the 4th of 2005. We got in his car and met a friend of his, Chris Brown, and drove to Big Red Oak Plantation, where we shot on the pheasant courses as it is today, and I broke 51 out of 100. I was thrilled. And I'd hunted most of my life and shot skeet back when I was young, but this was something new and different. Golf with a shotgun, as I say.
That's right. So we can blame Russ for that, is what you're saying.
Yeah. He's cost me a lot of money.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm hopefully he will listen to this and hear that. So after you shot that first, time out there, you were just hooked. Is that it? Just appealed to you, and
Just like everybody, Cody. Once you do it and try it, I mean, it's such an individual sport, because I played golf, most of my life, and it's a very competitive sport. It's a very individual sport, and that's what appealed to me.
yeah, it is. It's great. The camaraderie that you have with friends when you go out there, but yet, you're still working on achieving your goals independently, and it's very appealing to all types of folks. And so how do you go from just shooting the first round to president of the GSCA? Help me cover that bridge.
Well, we got involved heavily. There were a group of us that started shooting just about every weekend at registered shoots. And back in the day, there was a club called the Social Shooting Club that a gentleman by the name of Bert Smith had formed. It was a non-registered league, so to speak, and once a month we go to a different club and shoot. There was no pressure. We kept scores, but it was very informal. Then in about 2008 or 2009, the GSCA decided that they wanted to be in the shoot business. And they had a couple of shoots at a place called Millwood Lodge in Dublin, Georgia, where the GSCA ran the shoot. It was a disaster. They ended up running out of targets. They had to borrow a truck from Rick Hemingway to go pick targets up at Cherokee Rose. They wrecked the truck on the way back.
No.
Bottom line was that in about 2009 or 10, GSCA was about ready to go broke. So a bunch of us got together and tried to help them get back on their feet. And I could tell as a financial advisor, there was no oversight with the money. They were still keeping very rough records. So I ran for treasurer in 2012.
Okay.
And took over that spot because I knew I could manage the money a lot better than the gentleman that was managing it before. And then in 2013, Beverly Cole, who was the president, was stepping down, and I ran for president, and kind of the rest is history.
Okay. So when you took over the role as treasurer, I'm assuming it was in bad financial shape. And what did you assess, and how did you? I mean, the GSCA is thriving right now. Is
Oh,
my
absolutely. Well,
read
to
of
give
it.
you an example, in 2012, we threw 650,000 targets, which our income and revenue is based on target fees, and it's always been 3 cents. So that gave us a little over, $18,000, $19,000 per year. And we were spending a little bit of money, but not much. I mean, we're still doing the tokens at the Georgia State Shoot like we have done in the past. And so we started growing the number of targets we were throwing, and that gave us a lot more revenue. And last year in 2023, we threw just under 2 million targets.
Wow.
So in 10 years, we've tripled the number of targets we throw annually. And also, in 2012, we had 946 members. And this year, today, we've got 2,400 members.
That's
So
incredible.
we've grown the membership by almost threefold and the targets by threefold as well. So the sport has grown. I'd love to be able to take credit for it, but a lot of people have worked hard to make sure that the clubs are in place to throw the targets on the weekends so that there's no conflict and that everybody like you and I can go to a registered shoot and enjoy it.
Right. Well, there's so much behind the scenes stuff that's going on, and having seen behind the curtain, managing clubs and stuff. I'm not sure that a lot of shooters are aware that from that entry fee, that 3 cents is going to the GSCA off of every target thrown. And correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't the NSCA collect 4 cents a target?
Correct.
Yeah. So off every single registered target thrown, those dollars are being funneled to that. So the clubs aren't just getting all of that revenue from that shoot either.
That's right. And as a result of the number of targets we've thrown in the last 10 years, the GSCA has, some money in the bank. And one of the legacies that I'm trying to create, and we're going to start working on it in the very near future, and I've talked to some of the board members, is I want to be able to give scholarships away to high school seniors that are on their way to college, like the NSCA does.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. I mean, take some of that money and reinvest it back in the future generations of the sport.
Right. Because the hardest thing, Cody, as you well know, growing up in the sport, the parents have a lot to do with their children participating. But once a child gets out of college, life gets in the way. And if anybody can answer the question, how do we keep those kids involved? I know it's a economic issue. Jonna Cole talked about it in her podcast a few weeks ago, and I don't have the answer for it. I wish somebody would, grow a magic tree or something that grows dollars so that these kids after college can continue to shoot.
Yeah, and and I see that, while the parents are, funding the practice and shells and entry fees and everything, right? They're all able to do that. And as soon as they go to college and, maybe they graduate, life then takes over, right? You might have a career or starting a family, and those dollars aren't as free flowing as they once were. So therefore the shooting kind of dries up. But yeah, I see that all the time where, then once the family's established, I'll get a lot of, especially men, in their early 40s or something. I shot when I was growing up and I've got my career established, and, now I'm really wanting to get back into the sport. So yeah, if we could close that gap, That would be tremendous. But maybe some folks have some ideas of how to do that out there. I'd love to hear.
Yeah, exactly. Because I mean, let's face it, you get out of college in your early 20s, you start your family in your, late 20s, early 30s. You work for 10 years, you're 40 years old, and hopefully by then maybe your career has been established. I saw it in my business as a financial advisor for 30 something years. So
Yeah, and you have to work hard to get yourself established, and that typically doesn't leave a lot of time for hobbies or recreational activities, right?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, that would be a great legacy to leave on that. Having seen all the clubs in Georgia, I would describe all of them as thriving. Tell me, let's give people kind of an inside scoop on what the GSCA does with the clubs and, as far as picking the dates and, coordinating all that and just what are some of the other things that GSCA gets involved with?
Well, for example, I wish I could take credit for this, but Dominic Bethel at the Meadows created the Central Georgia Circuit Shoot, and the four clubs got together. I think this is the third or fourth year in a row that they've done it, with our blessing, and because it was a way we could enhance and entice more people to shoot, these registered events. So there are 8 shoots, they're spaced apart, and at the end of the day, they're going to spread some money around. I mean, I think the purse right now is somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000, and the GSCA contributed to that. I think we spent $2,500 to enhance that, but that's just one issue. Now, the calendar is probably the most important thing that I do every year, and the bylaws that we have are pretty succinct in that they talk about the 100-mile rule, that we can't have a shoot on the same weekend with a club within 100 miles. And that's been around for a while. And in the past, it was 150 miles. And then we had, some clubs on top of each other that just couldn't figure out dates. So we moved it closer to 100 miles. And that's worked out pretty well. So we don't have a whole lot of conflicts. And again, I'm pretty flexible in that I want to make sure the shoots have the proper dates and don't conflict with any of the other major shoots like the regionals or nationals or US Open. And that's always going to be a problem because there's just so many big shoots now.
It seems like, I know planning my shoot calendar and working that around coaching and just things in general. There's so many events and it's so hard to coordinate, all those shoots and fit them in between and still get good attendance, right? Because you're only pulling from the same pool of shooters. And if those shooters are, out of town for, a regional or a larger event, that local shoot will suffer in numbers. Um,
Exactly.
so
And
that's
that's
hard.
something we try to avoid, but, and I'll say this with a disclaimer that this stuff I'm going to say is my opinion only, that sometimes the governing body, the NSCA, doesn't take into account um, weather phenomenon. Our state shoot, for example, which is larger than most of the regionals. And for example, next year they put the Northeast Regional on our weekend. So then we had to move our state shoot, which we've had forever, to another weekend.
Yeah.
So we worked it out, but still, we get stepped on occasionally, and it's just something we have to deal with.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know how that. So is there any coordination from the state level to the national level on dates or anything, or does the NSCA just do the big shoots and then everybody else is expected to fill in around?
That's pretty much how it is. I mean, they are the governing body, and they control. Even though, Michael Hampton and I have a very good relationship, and every time this is the second time they've done it, I call him and complain. Hey, you stepped on us again.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So the main event of last year's Georgia State Sporting Clays, how many shooters were in that?
I think we had a total attendance of about 500. So I'm going to
Wow.
say 450, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds right. But I'm always shocked at how well attended that state shoot is. I mean, that's got to be one of the top attended state shoots in the country.
Well, when I was doing some writing for Clay Shooting USA, it really dawned on me, and Abby Chambers answered it as well as anybody, that if you can win the main event at the Georgia State Sporting Clays Association Championship, you've beaten some very, very good shooters.
That's right.
And those were her exact words. And I said, Abby, that's pretty profound. I've never thought of it that way. Because if you look at through the classes and from top to bottom, we have probably the most competitive number of really good shooters in the country.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
and as a result of that, as evidenced by that, the NSCA and Nationals always publishes the top state team for the main event, and Georgia was number one. Now,
Wow.
granted, we had Brandon and Zach Keenbaum, as our top two shooters, but still, we beat Texas, even though I live here. Their number of members are 3 times what ours is.
Right. Yeah. No, I think, looking at Georgia on a whole, having the clubs and the proximity that we have them in, things like the circuit shoot, and all of that. I mean, it's just created a group of, I'll say it, world-class shooters, that are concentrated here in Georgia. And it's great. And I think that level of competition, forces people to work harder, and, they're achieving, skills and skill sets that are, like you said, unrivaled. And that's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Well, and I know going forward, the sport, when I started 20 years ago, things have certainly changed, not only here in Georgia, but around the country. The machines have gotten better. The target setters have gotten better. The shooters have gotten better. The equipment has gotten better. So it's a progression. And I think going over the next 20 years, it's going to end up being the same. The targets are going to get harder. The equipment's going to get better. The coaching's going to get better. So, everything is going to, continue to ramp up.
I agree with that. And so you touched on something there, the targets have gotten harder. So this is a highly debated, contested subject. And I think if you polled 100 people, you're going to get 100 different answers. What is your sentiment on target difficulty at, say, a monthly registered shoot? What do you feel is the ideal kind of breakdown, of targets in that? And here's why I'm asking. I get a lot of students that train really hard, and they will do well at, say, a monthly shoot, but they want to go participate at a regional or at a US Open or something like that. And those targets should absolutely increase in difficulty with the scale of the event. But what 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 do you think is healthy for the sport? Like, let people break a lot of targets, challenge people, and make them better. I mean, I'd be really curious to know your opinion on that.
Well, I mean, I think there's 2 schools of thought, Cody, and you can take, one side or the other. One thought is let people break targets. It's not going to affect the outcome of the top 10 shooters. Let them shoot off in a super final, for a regional. Now, on the other hand, and I take my hat off to Rick Hemingway because I highly respect him, that we're going to throw harder targets at these regionals. And it's your expectation of how you're going to do against your concurrent and your class. Don't expect to go to a regional and win HOA if you're not prepared, if you're not one of the top level shooters. But how are you going to compete against your junior or sub junior or veteran or super senior veteran lady? And how are you going to compete against all your A or B or C class shooters? So I think, both answers have merit. Which side of the fence do you want to be on, I guess?
Yeah. Well, what I'm hearing you say is it's more your perception and outlook on it, and maybe critiquing your expectations accordingly and going to that event and gaining experience and comparing yourself against your peer group, and not necessarily, looking at HOA and if you're in C class and, feeling like you should be there as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. Where I see a lot of people, they're enjoying the sport, but it is a very challenging sport. But I also think that's part of the appeal of the sport as well, right? It looks so achievable, you know, even the gimme targets that people like to label them. But there's still a good target setter is gonna fool you with, a transition or, some little subtlety that you might not detect. And I think that's a great part of the game, right? Is when the target setters get creative and instead of just trying to beat you with speed and distance.
Exactly. And as I mentioned earlier, the target setters have really gotten good in that you don't have to throw 70-yard crossers on edge to beat shooting. I mean, you can throw a 35-yard looper, you know, even though it's showing you all bellies, you're going to miss those. Everybody's not going to be a Brandon Powell and shoot 100 all the time. But I'll take my hat off to some of the target setters who've gotten very creative and kind of learned how the machines can make his job so much easier.
Right. Yeah, it's learning how to use that tool. And I think so too. I've seen it in the time that I've been in the sport. The target setters have gotten better. They take different things into consideration, the position of the sun throughout the day and, all that. But there's a lot of folks that are priding themselves on being target setters now and maybe mentoring under like Jamie Peckham came over and set targets. Was that the Southeast Regional at Red Oak? Did he do the
Yes.
podcast? Yeah, I
Yes.
mean, those were some super creative, targets that had a different flair about them than, many other targets I've shot.
Right. Because he's an English guy that's set targets over there forever, set pretty much all the world FTAS targets that I'm aware of in the last 5 or 6 years. And so if I were going to emulate anybody on the planet, he would be in the top 5 of the list.
Yeah, I agree. They were really good targets. So Georgia State, historically, is there a set group of target setters for that? Does that rotate? I mean, I see some familiar faces at most of them.
Well, one of the comments that I like to make is that the GSCA, I don't want to be in the shoot business. I want the clubs to be in the shoot business. So once the club has the bid and has the date set, I'll leave it up to the clubs. Let them bring in who they want to bring in. Now, if they ask my opinion, obviously I'm going to give my opinion. But the good news is that we have 4 or 5 clubs that can host the state shoot because it's so big, and most of the clubs, Forest City, Big Red Oak, Old Hudson, Meadows, all those guys, all the managers of those clubs know each other well, and they all work together very well. So Savannah's going to bring in Big Mike from Big Red Oak. Old Hudson had him there last year. They may bring in Eric Dorsey from the Meadows. So it's something that the clubs do on a regular basis. Now, in 2000, it was either 13 or 15. Big Red Oak hired Anthony Matarese to come down and set targets. He was a great target setter back then.
Yeah.
So Rick Hemingway, he's another one that could come in and set targets. So we leave it up to clubs. Let the clubs make that decision because they're the ones that have the dollars on the line.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's the right decision on that. With there being so many events to be shot, I hear people picking and choosing the events that they want to go to because there may be a particular target setter that is setting those targets, or they may be choosing them because they like them, or they may be choosing them because they don't like them.
Right.
And there's a lot of that. So when the shooters are choosing not to go to an event because of the targets, do you think that's just strictly difficulty level, or is it visibility? What do you think is a flaw in target setting?
Well, that's a good question. A lot of it has to do with, what is the target setter's experience? What has he set that people have shot that they enjoy? Now, having said that, there have been some target setters that I personally didn't like their targets because they were too hard. Northbrook is one of them. I mean, Northbrook continues to throw difficult targets. And, I made the decision not to go to Northbrook, after a couple of visits up there because of the difficulty. Now, back to our earlier, conversation about, is it, are we going to the regionals for the right reason?
Right.
So that's kind of how it plays into it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think Northbrook has a reputation for throwing very challenging, hard targets and, unapologetically so. And I think that, there's a demographic of the shooting community that enjoys that and seeks that and thrives on that. So, it seems like there's such a vast population of shooters that, there's enough to go around, right? If you like the venue, if you don't like the venue, it's really, I don't think it's hurting the overall numbers. I mean, geez, look how far we have to sign up for stuff in advance. I
Well,
mean,
look at Nashville for next year.
yeah,
I mean, most of FETASC is full.
yeah,
So, I mean, right now there are probably 1,500 people signed up. It just was over less than a month ago.
yeah. No, it is just growing and growing and growing, which is great. And so the future of the sport and with it continuing to grow, like, do you think that Georgia, I'm of the mindset, like, if you're not growing, you're dying, right? You need to continue to innovate. You need to continue to do things to keep pressing forward. We can't just stagnate on that. Do you have any ideas of future events and shoots? Like, we just had the night shoot at the Meadows. And I don't know if you saw the attendance on that, but it was off the charts. And that, to me, that's just a novelty shoot that people just go crazy over.
Well, and I think that, the creative types, the Dominics of the world, the Bushes said, "Oh, Hudson," they'll figure out a way to hold events that are going to attract people. Now, as far as growing the sport, the SCTP program has gone through the roof, especially here in Georgia. My first state shoot at Savannah in 2012, there may have been 15 kids on that team.
Oh, wow.
Now they have close to 100.
Yeah.
They took 4 U-Haul car movers with all their side-by-sides and took them to Ohio from Savannah, Georgia.
Right.
So that kind of tells you that side of the sport is growing tremendously, especially here. And some of the bigger shoots, like the Seminole Cup, I know, for example, is going to have a SCTP concurrent.
That's great.
Yeah. So some of those events, may have some twists and tweaks to them to appeal to kids. So we'll see.
Yeah. So I'm in total agreement with you. The longevity of the sport and the the continued growth, it all starts with the youth. They're the next, you know, generation for sure with this stuff. And it's great seeing them. I see, you mentioned, Forest City, taking the car transporters with side by sides up there. I mean, that just takes a commitment level of the parents, of the coaches, they're all in. And I see that more and more in the local SETP clubs here. I mean, it has become more, or if not involved in travel baseball, right? There was rec league baseball, and then there's travel league, and um, that's what the shootings become. And it's so great to see that many families that are committed to it and facilitating that for the youth. And because that's how this sport lives on, in my opinion, is we have to get the youth involved in that.
And I think they are. I mean, I know in talking to, some of the leaders, Sylvia McCart, who's done a great job, you know, they're all in. I mean, they want to see that segment, the juniors and sub juniors concurrent growing, and it has.
Yeah.
Um, it's interesting too. There have been some complaints against having our state shoot in June, which I've been a big proponent of. Well, a while back, I think in 2014 or 15, we had the state shoot in May. There were 55 kids, and this is coming from Sammy McFadden. 55 kids that couldn't sign up because they were still in school.
Wow.
And that was at Okefenokee. So that kind of tells me that if we have the shoot in June, yeah, it's hot. We live in the South. If you want to be cool, go to Michigan. But, deal with it. And because we want the biggest attendance we can have.
That answers a good question. A lot of people in the 100-degree heat have asked, why is Georgia State in June? And I myself didn't know that was to allow, the youth to be out of school, so for maximum attendance. So I totally get that.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, the next wave of officers may change that sentiment, but, and along those lines, my term is up next June. I'm still going to continue to uphold my presidency till the next state shoot. We'll have elections 90 days before the state shoot. So somebody needs to step up and take my place.
Okay. Yeah. And so will that position be a vote amongst the GSCA population? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
It'll be Jay Heap has been running our elections for us, and he's done a great job. And so I think 90 days before the state shoot will require you to send a bio in, and whoever wants to run, and gets a popular vote can do it.
There you go. So all you listeners out there that want to be the GSCA president, get that bio together.
And I'm not going away. I'm just, it's time for somebody else to step in. I've had the honor. It'll be, I think, 12 years when I'm done. So let somebody else come in.
Right. Yeah. And Harvey, you won't say it, so I will. You've done a great job with balancing everything equally amongst the clubs, and keeping that spread out. And you've done a lot of thankless work, whether it be the newsletter, or all the phone calls that you field or emails that you get. So on behalf of the GSCA community, thank you for all you've done with that.
Well, I appreciate it, Cody. Thanks for saying that. I mean, I love the sport. I've enjoyed the heck out of it. Met some wonderful people along the way. What's going to happen in the future? I hope that the legacy continues and we throw over the next 10 years 4 million targets. Hopefully the clubs will stay in business and they'll have a venue for you to go shoot.
Yeah, absolutely. So as new clubs come online in Georgia, how did they find dates events? I mean, it seems like they're so sought after now. I mean, if somebody wanted to start a club tomorrow, and is there room for dates for registered shoots for them as well?
Oh, absolutely. I'll give you a prime example. We just had a new club open last month in October, Burnt Pine Farm, and they brought in a boatload of chromatic traps. They've got 3 courses set up now, and they called and said, can we get on the calendar for next year? And I said, yes, you can. I said, but you need to go read the bylaws and understand that we have a distance restriction of 100 miles, so that if a club near you, like Old Hudson, is having a shoot, you can't put a shoot on top of it. Now, having said that, in the past, we have done some double ups where 2 clubs, and like Cherokee Rose and Big Red Oak and the Meadows, had a 3-day weekend shoot, all the clubs combined. So there's possibilities on both ends.
Okay. Yeah. So Burnt Pine is in New Bern, Georgia, and I actually have been there a couple times now coaching, and they've done really wonderful things. And anybody that hasn't made that trip out there, it's worth seeing. I was very impressed. They've hired Clint Hinton. He's working out there. I think is the course manager, and the targets were great, and they're going to do big things out there. So that's another great club to have within an hour and a half driving range here in Metro Atlanta.
Yeah, yeah. And Clint's a great kid. I mean, he's been around the sport as long as I have. He and his cousin Willie and Matt Fisher were the kind of 3 musketeers that grew up in the SCTP program. Will Hinton's a Olympian. Matt lives not too terribly far from me here, and Clint's in the business. So
yeah, great family, all in on that sport for sure. So Harvey, what else do we have in Georgia coming up that the season's kind of winding down? Really, the first big shoot back, that would be Seminole Cup, right? Everything's kind of winding down. We got a couple of circuit shoots wrapping up.
One more circuit shoot. I think I looked. There are 4 more shoots left this year. But going forward, obviously the Seminole Cup is next year, but also, Dominic and Kevin DeMichael and Bill McGuire are putting on the Shooters Championship next year, which they've got a lot of money invested, and it's going to be a big shoot. I mean, I think there are 750, 800 people right now.
Wow.
And after that, we'll have the state shoot, which I've been told the registration should be open here pretty soon. And we'll let everybody know about that through the newsletter. And it's going to be at Forest City. It's 2 weeks after Father's Day, so I don't have the dates right in front of me. But we'll announce that. And then, we've got, the regular circuit shoots, and Garland Mountain, after they've come back from their fire that they had last year, they put on 9 or 10 shoots for next year.
Oh, so wow. They added a bunch.
Yeah. So they're going to be back. Peter and Jack have wanted to start, throwing registered targets again. So I'm excited about them because they've been off the map for a year.
Yeah, that fire just absolutely devastating. That clubhouse was a total loss, and really glad to see them back on their feet throwing targets. They've done a wonderful job of renovating that old utility building they had there as a clubhouse check-in, and I mean it's unrecognizable from a workshop building now. I mean, they've done a fantastic job, but really glad to hear they're going to be throwing more registered targets up there. That's such a beautiful venue.
Yeah. And so, I think next year is going to be a big year. The state shoot again at Forest City. We don't have a regional next year. It's going to be at Backwoods, the Southeast region. So, but that's okay. You got to spread it around.
That's right. So a lot of folks with these big shoots, when you're talking about spreading them around and, even like state shoots. So there's a whole bid form that, I've been involved submitting for. Talk a little bit about that. Why do some clubs get to host certain events and what is the selection process like? I don't think a lot of people know that how that works.
4 or 5 years ago, we had kind of a gentleman's agreement between Big Red Oak, the Meadows, and Forest City that we would alternate every year. And when Old Hudson got to the point where they were capable of hosting a state shoot, they won the bid for this year. And going forward, it's going to be on a bid basis, not a rotation. Now, having said that, the guys that are on the board kind of recognize that, again, because our state shoot's so big, there are only 3 or 4 places that can have it.
Yeah, I
So,
mean, parking, need parking and, just course space and all that.
yeah, I mean, you're talking about, 13 or 14 events for a weekend, and you've got to have the space and the number of traps, the number of trappers, parking to accommodate all these people. Some of the smaller clubs just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. So
going
I'm
forward,
sorry.
it's going to be on a bid basis.
And when you say on a bid basis, so the club's filling out a form and they are putting in what they are willing to put up for purse money and what events that they're going to throw. Is there a template that the club must throw X amount of targets, or is that kind of open for interpretation?
Well, we want it so that the main event's 200 targets, VTAS is 100 targets, super sporting, which has become, one of the biggest attending events now, sub gauge. We want them to make sure that you can have all those events available for all days, if possible.
Uh-huh.
So that puts a strain on how many tracks you have to throw 13 or 14 events for 3 or 4 days.
That's a lot of machines.
Yeah, yeah, it is. But
Yeah.
most of the time, the clubs, I know Big Red Oak and Old Hudson will reach out to Promatic to get some help with them and bring machines in. Because I remember one year, and maybe it was last year, it was at the regional, the Texas State shoot ended on Sunday, and those guys were in their trucks with their Promax machines coming from wherever the Texas State shoot was last year, driving to Big Red Oak, you know, after the shoot was over on Sunday and got to Big Red Oak Monday or Tuesday.
Yeah, those Promatic guys, hats off to them. They bend over backwards to make it happen, and the event always runs really well. They got some of the best mechanics and machines in the game, no doubt.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, that's great. Like I say, it's just so interesting to me that we're kind of giving folks a behind the scenes look of all the things that go on and make the club so successful, because there's so much involved in it when you know all the behind the scenes stuff. So Harvey, what else would you like to cover this evening? We've hit all the hot topics here. When are you going to be back in Georgia to do some shooting?
I'll be back for sure for the state shoot. But,
Okay.
one of the things that we have not talked about, Cody, I'd like to just touch on a little bit, good or bad trends in the sport. The good trends are that the targets, as I mentioned earlier, are becoming more difficult. Your job as a coach is going to be to help people hit these targets. And that's wonderful because, obviously you've got students that have excelled and grown and being able to hit a 40 or 50 yard crosser on edge. Now, having said that, the bad trends, and I don't like to bring this up, but I want to for an education purpose, that what I've seen here in Georgia is the parents getting in the way of their child or children becoming good at the sport. And having said that, we've had to make some adjustments, and we've had to penalize some shooters because the parents got in the way. We had to suspend one young man for a year because the father cheated. I'm not going to mention any names, but it happened. And we've also watched some of the other shooters that have gone out with their dad, for example, and shot 90s in a local tournament and come to a big shoot and shoot 50. So that's why we passed the 3-person minimum at a registered shoot with scoring to be done by a disinterested third party. And if you don't know what a disinterested third party is, let me tell you, it's not your mother, it's not your father, it's not your brother, your sister, your girlfriend, or whatever. So it's somebody that's totally removed from the shoot. So those are kind of the good news and bad news.
Yeah. Well, it's a subject that's really touchy, but I'm really glad that this is something that I believe in so firmly, that the sport requires such a deep level of integrity because of a lot of the events don't have trappers there. And a lot of the events are self-scoring, and you can get together with 4 of your buddies. But what I want to point out is, what are you instilling in your son or daughter if you're allowing them to get that win through cheating, right? You're setting them up to prove that you can circumnavigate the system in a way that shortcuts hard work, and you're robbing somebody that is doing it the honest and integral way. And that's so disappointing. And I think, as a shooter, as a coach, as a squad mate, we are all bound to police that. And, I think what happens is, and I'm gonna play the nice route on this. I think people think they see chips a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's genuine. And I think that they may be seeing the wad, or they may be seeing who knows what. Dust, anything. But if you believe you hit that target and the trapper says lost, in my opinion, what that shooter should then do is look to the squad and politely ask, didn't anybody see a piece off of that target? And if the vast majority, or the majority, says no, it's over and done with right there.
Yeah. In our group that we used to shoot with, Cody, you can ask once if anybody saw anything. If it was no, it's been answered, move on.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many times I've seen people complain or argue with everybody. No, I hit it. Well, you already asked once. No, you did. Move on. So
Right. And it's just that black and white. And here's the other integrity side of it. This happened to me at the Fraser 500 on both Saturday and Sunday. There were trappers that were older. They may not have seen well. And I missed the bird, and they called it dead pair. And I turned to the group and I said, did anybody see anything come off of that target? Now, I'm being awarded a target that I believe I just missed.
Yeah.
And I turned to the group and nobody saw anything off that target. So I had the trapper change my score to a lost bird, subtracting a target from my score that they were going to give me. But I don't feel we should ever take a target that we haven't earned.
Oh, I agree with you. And I mean, it's happened to everybody that the trapper saw something, or somebody saw something. Or on the other hand, that you thought you hit that nobody saw. So it's a give and take. And at the end of the day, it's all going to end up being a wash. But But when I go to bed at night, I can say, you know what? I earned every chip and target that I hit.
That's right. Yeah. And I think that with the youth, they're looking for those examples to be set. And if not from the parents, then it's from the shooting community. And we need to self police on that. And we need to call people out when we see that being blatantly done. And because it is common. And I'll tell you another thing that and I hope that clubs will adopt this more and more. On the circuit shoots, the scores are not entered in and visible on Score Chaser until the last scorecard is turned in. And I like that.
Yeah.
Because often you will find that some of the last cards turned in can be one bird higher than the posted score. Okay. Kind of an odd coincidence.
Well, again, you mentioned it, it's all about integrity and, and how do we police it? You know, the GSCA can suspend, expel, punish, whatever we want to do. But unless somebody comes forward and says, hey, Joe Blow cheated, we can't do anything about it.
Right. And it's such a hard thing to prove in that moment. We should all just be ambassadors of the sport, right? Set that example, be that person that everybody wants to be squatted with. Now, this is just a belief of mine. And Harvey, you can disagree or say you do something similar. If I'm the first shooter and once I'm done shooting, I'll rotate back. But in my opinion, the on deck shooter is a second set of eyes for the trapper or the scorer. And it's just a polite courtesy for them to be paying attention. And also, often I am watching the trapper record the scores to see if what the shooter in front of me. Now, I may or may not know this person, right? I may be randomly squatted, but I'm just making sure that they're recording the right answers on that card. And to me, that's just part of being a good squad mate. Because
exactly.
I hope the person standing behind me is doing the exact same thing for me. But I think that, Harvey, you and I take that as unspoken etiquette. But I think that we need to get that out there. That is part of playing the game as well.
Exactly. And it's all about, if the guy behind me's not watching, shame on him, because if you're up and I'm behind you, I'm going to watch every target because you and I shoot a very similar method. I'm going to see where you're holding the gun. I'm going to see where you're going to break the target. I'm going to be watching for me, not for you, but for me. Because it's going to help me out tremendously.
Absolutely. So once you have stepped out of that cage, hopefully the trapper has announced, shooter number 1, 2, 3 out with 6. Once that's announced, correct me if I'm wrong, but you are then accepting that as your score recorder.
Not necessarily. So the rule says that once you leave a station, that score stands. So if she made an error while you're still standing there, that you broke 6 and she only recorded 5, you can say, ma'am, you made an error. I broke all 6 of those. And maybe the squad mate would say, yes, he did. And there wouldn't be an issue. But if there is an issue, that at that moment, before you leave, you must call the course manager if there is one. And I'm talking a big register shoot with trappers.
Sure. Yeah. But again, I don't think that that's known. If you're 3, 4 stations into it and beyond that, and you discover, the cards are wrong, you've missed your window of opportunity to dispute that.
Yeah. Now, having said that, Cody, I've seen numerous times where there was a mistake made and it got corrected somewhere down the road. But for most cases, once you leave the station, your score is set.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's good. I'm glad that we've touched on that, because I think it's such an important part of that, sport. And I try to instill that in my students, that look, this is how we play the game, right? It's uh, a game, I'll describe it as a gentleman's game, right? Where we want to, it's like golf, right? You can cheat in golf. You can kick it, towards the hole a little closer if you wanted to, but you're only cheating yourself. Yeah. Well, that's great. Well, Harvey, I have thoroughly enjoyed talking with you this evening, and I appreciate your time and coming on the show. I think, the GSCA is going to continue to thrive. We, again, appreciate your work on that, and I can't wait to see where the future held for the GSCA.
Well, I appreciate you, Cody, for being, as diligent as you are. And I know, some of the friends of mine that have taken lessons from you, you've done a great job. My only regret is that I'm not there to spend some more money with you. So, but, it's been fun. I've enjoyed doing this. And whoever takes my place next year, I'm not going away. I'll still be here to help them and what have you. So.
That's great. Well, Harvey, thank you again. I appreciate everybody tuning in to the episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We want to grow this channel as much as we can. So, Harvey, take care, and we'll catch up soon.
Cody, safe travel, saints.
Thanks for joining us. Remember to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform to the Clay Lab so you don't miss an episode. Check out MatsonShootingAcademy.com or reach out to Cody at MatsonShootingAcademy@gmail.com. Consider joining as a channel member too by clicking that join button below on YouTube for early access to videos and podcasts. We'll catch you here next time on the Matson Shooting Academy Podcast.